Well, Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. Good to talk to you from a beautiful Friday morning here in Minneapolis.
Yes, thank you for the weather report. This is the time
Yeah.
when we'll normally talk about our least favorite sausages or our
Right. Yeah.
creepy Hummel figurines, but we don't have time for
Don't have
silliness
time.
today. No, we
No.
don't. There's too much news going on, and
Serious time.
We're visiting. We're actually a visiting team. We're at the lovely 160 studios virtually. Thank you to the 160 team for fitting us into their busy schedule for some late breaking news. We need a late breaking news flasher
Right.
of some kind. So,
Some like ticker machine sound like
that's right. Dun, dun, dun,
that's right.
dun.
Dun, dun,
Buckwheat is
dun,
dead.
dun.
Remember that one? That was a classic. Anyway, that was a Saturday Night Live thing. But we're here with our host, Joe Mullings. Joe, welcome to your studio, our podcast.
Yeah. So, Tom, Chris, good to see you. And like you said earlier, special shout out to the Dragonfly team for getting
Absolutely.
this. You and I were on the phone last night, and right out to Nicole Ager and the team. So let's jump into the late breaking news.
That's
Yes, let's
right.
do
Like
it.
heading over the
So,
wires last night, we had the news that Intuitive had won FDA clearance of their next gen Da Vinci 5 robot. We actually had a quick scoop like 2 months ago about them seeking FDA clearance for it because I did something radical. I actually sat down and listened to the earnings call and was like,
crazy.
oh, they're wow, yeah, crazy idea.
Yeah,
So this was
the
obviously
projection was going to be late April, and it came, early. And
Hmm.
Tom, I want to hear what you have to say, but let's just note this that the FDA got this out in March. So let's just put a pin in that and keep talking.
No, that's great,
Yeah.
and we were anticipating it. We do have Brian Miller at he's EVP and Chief Digital Officer at Device Talks Boston, precisely because we were anticipating the approval to come this spring. But there was part of me that was like, oh, I hope this really happens, and the FDA did deliver. So we'll be talking a lot about surgical robotics at Device Talks Boston. We'll have distal
Yeah.
motion, we'll have Medtronic, we'll have Quantum. We'll have Stryker. I'm doing a keynote with CMR, and now, of course, the aforementioned Intuitive conversation. It's a big topic at Device Talks Boston. Next week, we also have our surgical robotics virtual week on Device Talks Tuesdays, which actually extends Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. We'll have presentations by Intuitive and Medtronic and Virtual Incision, which I know is a favorite company of yours, Joe, as well. So we've got surgical robotics on the mind. And then when the news came out, Chris and I were kind of bouncing back and forth. Who can we get to talk about it? And of course, first and foremost, let's get Joe and see if he's
Absolutely.
available. So that stage being set, Chris, you're the professional journalist here. I'm just a studio guy. Uh,
Oh, don't say
ask,
that, Tom. Come on.
take it away.
Well, I mean we had FDA clearance of the new robot, and this kind of this is like their next generation multi-port surgical robot. There'd been a lot of speculation over the last year or two when they would get a next generation robot out, and along with announcing the FDA clearance, they gave a nice summary of like all the different improvements that they've packaged into the Da Vinci 5 versus previous systems, including they've got new. Well, actually, I'll start out with the thing that stuck out the most to me was that they said that the Da Vinci 5 has 10,000 times more computing power than the Da Vinci Z, the previous generation, which, I mean, they're saying this just isn't for, what the type of, programs they could run on it now, but they've, you know, packaged in all this computing power so that, for, whatever, developers, figure out in the future that you could run on the system. So they've really, I mean, that kind of signals to me they've really built this thing to, to be something that you could run a lot of innovative software on for potentially, for years. So, I mean, that really stuck out to me. And then, there's all kinds of I saw their packaging and features to a bunch of extra features to help with the workflow flow in the OR. Very important for health providers right now with all the challenges they're going through with efficiency. I mean, got the list goes on and on. I mean, new surgeon controllers with these, with vibration and tremor controls to to have a smoother experience for the surgeon. Next gen 3D display and image processing, this force feedback technology, to to measure the forces being exerted on tissue during surgery, and a whole new data stream to analyze because of this force feedback technology. And it's and also they made the console more more, they say that the new console is more comfortable for the surgeons, which if you're a surgeon doing all these procedures for the day, having a more comfortable console sounds like a good plan. So that's
No, it
in a
sounds
nutshell. Yeah.
sounds like a complete package, and I know one thing I've been seeing on social media, and I know the messaging has sort of been that this has been 10 years in the making. So, Joe, we'll turn to you.
Yeah.
This seems like, I feel like Joe Biden after Obamacare passed. Like this is a big family show deal, What was your takeaway, Joe? What were you anticipating, and what are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think, Chris, you pointed it out. Intuitive just released the chassis for probably the next 5 to 7 years. In the past, we could have said 10 years, but I just think the cycle of innovation occurring right now is probably 5 to 7 on a chassis like this. So, and then the changing centers of care, and we'll jump into that in a minute too. So not surprising, any of these features. Most of these were sort of baked into the conversations happening, but what's more important, you inferred what else is under the skin, right? These features did not take 10 years to reveal themselves. I think that this is another intuitive of pulling people deeper into the pool. This is a time that Intuitive has done two things right now. They've created this technological moat around robotics that people think that, oh, it's a knockoff on Da Vinci Xi, or you're not going to have a knockoff on Da Vinci 5 for a long time. So that's number one. Number two is Gary talked about, or Intuitive talked about, there's going to be a very, very limited release on this. So the reason they came out really fast on this is this is going to freeze any CapEx acquisition coming down range for any robot that's out there right now on that larger format, higher acuity case robotic system. And then you hear them use the word placements rather than sales. And these are all things you have to note, because if you're just looking at this as at a robot instead of a surgery as a service, robotic assisted surgery as a service is really what Intuitive is pushing here. So they've built the robotic moat around the business. They've just staked it earlier. It's going to freeze any, especially OUS, any high acuity surgical robotic platform. And then they're building the financial moat around the business where you don't have to buy the robot. You're going to lease it. We're going to partner with you. And then we're going to share the risk and the reward as you go ahead and no longer have to find 1.5 to 2 million to acquire something like this. And so now Gary's going to get, rather than and he's got that war chest to be able to do this. And now he's just delivered to the surgeons a very meaningful platform. Again, very limited launch, but it's going to still freeze the market. I don't expect them really coming out en masse, probably till even Q1 of 2025, but he did what he wanted to do. He froze the market. And now everything's going to be compared to, and this is where Intuitive gets that 20 years of inertia where they continue to move the goalpost. Every other surgical robotic, large format surgical robotic platform on these high acuity cases had to put a flag in the ground, and they had to put the flag in the ground trying to get close to Intuitive. And Intuitive just moved that flag, and everybody else is frozen in place there. As they go ahead now, they're locked into their pathway to the FDA. So go ahead, Tom. Question
is the market? Let's. There's a lot to unpack there. A lot of great stuff. Let's talk about freezing the market first of all. Is the market frozen for a strategic that would have acquired a smaller surgical robotics company to complement their own surgical tools portfolio, or is the market also frozen for larger companies that are developing their own systems? And maybe you could unpack a bit what frozen means. I mean, because these companies just aren't going to stop.
Yeah, frozen means is, so let's look at Hugo as an example, and even Ottava as an example, right? Let's look at those two right now. Both J&J and Medtronic had to get into the robotic assisted business because they were having erosion to their current market because of Intuitive. And this is gonna really hurt more because now the feature set, the surgical end effectors, the tools, the ancillary, the devices that go with this, the digital capabilities, the data that the hospital and or outpatient surgery centers are going to now be able to get will far surpass what was in Ottava and Hugo, highly likely. So that's one. And now you're eating into an 80% gross margin on their analog endosurgery business. And now you're moving them even, Intuitive's pulling them deeper into the pool of razor thin margins if Hugo really does get market acceptance. If Ottava does get through the FDA in 2005, I might even say 2006. And so they had to freeze their systems against the standard of the XI. And now Gary's just moved the goalpost way down range. And so you don't have that subject matter expertise in J&J or Medtronic. You're not a digital native. And now you're going to be comparing Hugo and Ottava to what they could only imagine XI was in. So that's what I mean by moving the goalposts. And their designs and pathway to the FDA had to be frozen. I can guarantee you it didn't include any of these feature sets that now Da Vinci 5 has out.
I mean, have they basically just already won the game then?
No, the game's not over, right? We're playing an infinite game with robotic-assisted surgery. But what I think you did is you now accelerated the lower acuity, not less complicated, but I think you just accelerated the value of the distal motions and the Moon surgicals, because they are going to be directed at that middle market, middle acuity. And to compete against Intuitive as a core against the high acuity cases is just, they're pulling you deeper into the pool on the financing moat, as well as the technological moat and the form factor moat. And so now, why pick a fight in that area, which is where Hugo, I believe, and Ottava are trying to pick it. Now you got to drop down to the middle acuity cases as an entry point. So I think this is good for surgical robotics overall. And it now will accelerate people saying, okay, form factor, acuity, that's where we have to fight. Now, if you think Intuitive doesn't have 4 solutions sitting on the sidelines for the middle acuity cases as a Gen 5 Lite, you're crazy. But I think that Intuitive's going to wait for 2 years, 3 years until the ambulatory surgical centers declare what does that financial model look like, because there's no reason to fight there right now. And then as soon as Intuitive sees where that market's declaring itself, because it's still early, I think they're going to come out with a middle acuity platform that those surgeons are already accustomed to, but the first movers that will get through FDA or through FDA on that middle acuity in ASC will have a different fight on their hand, but by then they'll have been acquired by highly likely Medtronic, J&J, or dare I say Stryker, because you're going to need the money to fight in that space. So I think Da Vinci 5 is a blessing for the lower acuity, mid to large format robots. That's where I'm holding my position right now.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to suggest that a Medtronic or I mean, they're not small companies. They've got financial force, and I hear exactly what you're saying about Da Vinci 5 and the problems it creates. But I have to think that it's hard to envision. I mean, it's hard for me to envision kind of a single standard of surgical robotic system being adopted across healthcare. There's going to have to be room for, yes, the distal motions and the moons, but also for other larger comprehensive surgical systems. Do you think?
Yeah, but they're always going to be compared against the platinum standard. You can't make a robot cheaper than Da Vinci 5. It's not possible, right? You can't do that. Then when you think about the Chinese robots, you're going to have IP issues plus the geopolitical issues pulling those into the US. So I'm talking about the US market right now.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, we'll focus on that.
Right, let's focus on the US market. So let's look at the US market at large. Any of these other large formats, CMR is going to come in. CMR, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is right now, I think, in the FDA. And so CMR, solid robot. But again, the price is not going to be much different. And then you've got a war chest of billions of dollars that, you know, I think about Intuitive just starving people after they bring in all their troops, all their supplies, set up their camp and commit everything. And then Intuitive's going to go, oh, okay. And now I'm going to move it this way with my financial moat, or I'm going to move it with my technological moat. I would not want to be in a fight, and you're not going to accelerate 20 years of expertise in order to catch up to an Intuitive. So I'm not saying that large format, high acuity robotic platform form factor and business model isn't up for grabs, but it's not up for grabs in the next decade.
Right.
Wow.
Fascinating. And the business model aspect, the financial, the robotic surgery as a subscription or a service sort of model, whatever you want to call it. That obviously opens the doors for other providers to be able to afford it, but it also changes the financial, and I think we've talked about this before, the financial parameters for Medtronic and J&J as they're moving into the space. They can't now budget, well, if we spend this, we'll make that, because that is suddenly a lot less clear than it was prior. Is that where we're sort of headed? It's just going to sort of mystify the whole financial model of surgical robotics?
Well, it really impacts the startups, right? So if you look at the startup companies, so this is where the build to buy model and the venture companies and private equity companies that have constructed their sort of thesis around a build to buy model, this accelerates the build to buy model in surgical robotics. Why? Because the original thesis in surgical robotics, if you look at a Vicarious or you look at a CMR, was build a robot, sell a robot, put 1.5 million into the coffers. We can at least finance the company. But now, if the lease model is the current standard of business, that financing requires the company to have to carry that, the startup company, to have to carry that financial burden, where in the past, it was not built like that. So what does that mean? That means that the J&Js and the Medtronics and the Strykers, dare I say, will, on soft tissue robotics, will have the financial wherewithal, but their R&D budgets are smaller than ever. And so any acquisition generally comes off the R&D balance sheet. So if you're going to go out and buy a surgical robotic platform that's already generating revenue, you need a few things to happen. You need that large format soft tissue surgical robotic platform to have the $1 billion required even before you're acquired, you need that in place. And then you need to develop a robot that at least is infringing upon where Intuitive's going and convince people to buy that. And so that model will not exist in the large format up against Intuitive, but the build to buy will. So you will get the digital native surgical robotics startup company that will be financed by the off-balance sheet of a J&J or a Medtronic or a Stryker. They will then share the clinical lift that's required through the large player. And then they'll be able to, the large player will then be able to construct their go-to-market team, their support team in that large format to be able to take that to market. So the acquisition price will be lower, the risk will be mitigated out, the robot that's being built will be built by robotic experts, and then the financial model no longer is a moat by Intuitive. But all those dynamics are going to have another 3 or 4 years ahead of them in large format, high acuity robotics. That's why I come back to some of these middle market acuity companies like Moon and Distal that are addressing the market in the ASC. And then Gary will come in, or Dave will come in, and they will unleash their hounds, their sales team, marketing team, data team, reputation into the ASC market. But by then, there'll probably be 2 or 3 acquisitions in that middle acuity surgical robotic platform, in my opinion.
It sounds like there's at least a few years window when those companies can get in and try to do something.
There's no rush for Intuitive to get into that right now. Right now, with the release of 5, and until you start to have some of these de novo ASCs being built out of the ground, where that's an entire market that Intuitive's not in right now, right? So you have to skate to where Intuitive is not in robotic assisted surgery in their form factor. And that is exclusively the ASCs. If you're going to market as your primary market into the hospital setting, you're going to, without exception, you're going to get suffocated over time.
What about the surgical? I've got so many questions. First question, Intuitive kind of let this leak out in January that this was, it was something the analysts kind of picked up on rumors. This obviously had to be a project that's been going on for a long time. Was it widely known that there was a 5 coming out? I've talked to Intuitive people, interviewed. I've never said, "Hey, when's 5 coming out?" I should have asked that question, I suppose. Though they probably wouldn't have answered. But is this something that you have seen being in the works for a long time, or has Intuitive sort of been really successful at keeping this on the down low?
I think at any point in time, Tom, that Intuitive has a number of programs going on. The same way that even Oris and Verb had their internal bake-off on their 2 robots to see, what was best in class. And then they've been listening to the market really well. When you didn't have a threat in the market at all on a form factor, that as a large format form factor, you're listening to the market. What are the docs been saying? Every SRS you went to that Vip Patel runs and his team is, you can give me an Intuitive robot, but I'll take 80% of what Intuitive could do, but give me a better visualization system and let me see what I can't see. So, that has always been in development. The weakness in any large format robot has always been the visualization system. Until as of late, the workflow and the console, they haven't had to worry about that too much. I think you're seeing the current console release on 5 to be probably a precursor to an open cockpit that I think you're going to have to see in an ASC model. So it sort of is their hybrid move into it. Although surgeons still love the fidelity factor of having their head immersed in there. And probably reduce that console by 30% on the weight side, which is a big issue. And the form factor probably shrunk down a bit. So I think this has been going on. I think at any point in time, you've got a half a dozen legitimate programs going on with Intuitive that are answering what they're listening to through, what do they have? 14 million cases in all their portfolio. And they've got an installed base of 8,000, 8,500 robots. You're getting a lot of data back.
Yeah, it's hard to compete with that. Final question, because I know you get a full day. Chris, do you have one or?
No, keep on going, Tom. You're on a roll.
Where does this play? This is the kind of where this play out sort of question, but I had an interesting conversation with or a LinkedIn post about BD and about their change in the lead of surgical. For those companies out there that have the surgical tools, but don't yet have a surgical robotic system, what is this signal to them? Do they just, I mean, it had seemed previously, it seemed like, well, they might buy a CMR, or they might buy a system to kind of get into the game more quickly. If that freezing is happening, what happens with surgical device companies that don't have a robotic system yet? How do you see sort of that unfolding over the next couple of years? Do they just sit and wait? Is this a starter pistol telling them that they have to act now? How does that area of medtech unfold or unpack?
I think if you don't have a surgical robot today on a soft tissue side, so that's the conversation today, soft tissue side and form factor. So let's talk about a large form factor on the soft tissue side. I think it accelerates if your Medtronic, J&J, Stryker, I'll even say BD. I'm really surprised Becton Dickinson on the soft tissue side's not got in yet. They might, but let's say J&J, Medtronic, and Stryker. I think you have to get into the surgical robotic world, but you've got to do it in a lower to mid acuity case. Hopefully their egos will not get in the way, that they need to be operating at that elite and get into a fight, right? You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And if you're going to get in a fight with Intuitive, they're all bringing a knife to a gunfight and you're just going to get destroyed. So I think this accelerates J&J, Medtronic, and Stryker of getting into that middle acuity case into the ASC world. This is so good for robotic-assisted surgery at large because it's now going to allow R&D dollars to be poured into something that will actually get to the market in soft tissue robotics. And there are a couple platforms out there right now that are primed to be able to be solid entrance into that model, Tom. So I think this is fabulous. for.
It's a great message. There can be more competition from this. That it's not
Well,
going
it's
to be
not
a competition
competition.
squelcher.
No, it should set the stage for what you shouldn't fight in. And if you go ahead and go large format against them right now, your shareholders should probably come with torches and stakes. And so you need to be able to go into the market you can win in. So that's what I think it does. That's my takeaway on this one. I think it's fabulous for the market at large, and I think it's fabulous for, again, the middle acuity, large format, mid format robotic surgical platforms that are going into the areas that Da Vinci is not right now.
All right, great. Well, we clearly came to the right place for insights and understanding. So, Joe Mullings, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
It's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a good one. Hey, Chris, before we go, show me that Prince Cup again.
Yeah, doing some Minneapolis representing here.
Love
So
it.
there you go. That's right.
See you guys.
Take care, everyone.
All right, see you. Take care.